All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, today we are going to be going over how the United States basically got Florida, the Monroe Doctrine, and then we're going to be talking about like some of the rules and things that uh, African Americans, back in the slavery times, what they couldn't do and things like that. And, we're going to talk about one of the most famous runaway slaves of all time. Okay. So, the objective, we're going to analyze how the cotton gin made things actually worse for slavery. We're examining the different ways slaves tried to strike back against their owners, because that's a big one. A lot of students I've heard throughout my years, they're saying, like, oh, they didn't fight back, they didn't do this and that. I'm like, yeah, they did. They actually did. And we're going to talk about that today. All right. So, let's go ahead and get started. So here is your warm-up picture. The warm-up question is asking you, what do you notice about the continents of Africa, United States, or sorry, Africa, North America, and Europe? Because again, United States is not a continent. That's why I started laughing. I made a goof. Sorry, guys. So, what do you notice about the country of Africa compared to Europe and North America? Okay. So what do you think those little pebble rock things represent? Okay. So think about it. Pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right. So Southerners were very, very upset because the thing is, escaped slaves would cross into Florida. Now, thing is, Florida at this time was not our state. It was not our property. It was Spain's. And the thing is, these guys would run through across the border, and when the Southerners would try to chase them, they were fought off by these Seminole Indians. Now, someone asked me some time ago, some years ago, did the Seminole Indians attack the runaway slaves? I wouldn't doubt it. I'm sure they, you know, attacked them maybe once or twice, but thing is, they knew there's a difference between someone running for their lives and people who are hunting. There's a difference, and also too, the Seminole Indians, they've had a run-in with white settlers, and they knew, yeah, these guys, we've had a clash with them. So, okay. Now, if you're a big football fan, like college football or college basketball, you'll know that name Seminole sounds familiar. Florida State. Okay. Now, Spain couldn't really control their borders. Thing is, they were spread out too thin all over on Latin American side and all over North America and South America. So they really couldn't have control over what was happening in their territories. So Secretary of War John C. Calhoun, that picture you see right there, that's him. He was like, you know what? Well, we're going to settle this whole thing, And so he sent some troops down to Florida under the command of this guy named Andrew Jackson. Now, you're going to learn about Jackson next class, and you're going to learn how him and the Native Americans, how they get along. And I'll tell you this, it's not very good. Okay. So, Spain was, again, having a lot of issues. So, finally, the United States was like, you know what, just give us the land. We're putting in this pressure on you. We don't want to send in more troops, things like that. Just give us the land, and that's one less worry you have to worry about. So Spain did. They seceded. They gave us um, Florida, because again, they were dealing with so much other crap in Latin America and in South America. Now, because of that stuff going on in Latin America and South America, they were losing their colonies. The areas that they conquered, a lot of these places were gaining their independence. Places in uh, Panama, um, uh, what's it called, Colombia, Mexico, you know, they were fighting back, trying to get their independence. Now, why is this significant? Because a lot of countries had territories around the world. France, Portugal, you know, they were like, okay, if Spain loses control And word gets to these other countries that we control that, hey, there's a spark of revolution. These countries got their independence. We can too, you know. So let's fight. So they didn't want that. So they basically told Spain, hey, control these territories. You need to have control, you know. Do what you got to. Don't let them slip through your fingers. Don't let them become independent. Now, Great Britain and the United States didn't want Spain to regain these territories. Okay, that's their number one goal, to stop them. Now, in 1821, Russia basically like, hey guys, guess what? You know that territory like full of ice with the little Eskimos, Alaska? Yeah, guess what? We own it. Yeah, we own all that Alaska, and we own that territory, goes all the way down to where the Oregon Territory is. Yeah. Yeah, that's all ours, you know. So this kind of upset President Monroe, and he was like, you know what? I don't like the idea that these guys, these countries think they can come into our side of the world and take a piece of it when it's like, no, no, that's not right, you know. Then he issued in December 1823 this thing called the Monroe Doctrine, which basically told the world this side of the world, North America, South America, is closed. No other countries can come over here, you know. And on top of that, they were putting again pressure on Spain, telling them, you know, these people, in Mexico, um, Guatemala, Panama, Colombia, Chile, these people have been living here forever. You know, this is their land. They should have sovereignty. Sovereignty means control. They should have sovereignty over their territory and of their lives. How dare you try to kick them out and move them and tell them what to do? I don't know if you guys know what the word hypocrite means, but hypocrite is basically when someone tells you, don't do this, don't do that, hey, don't do that, and yet they do it. You know, that's a hypocrite. America, again, is telling Spain and the world, let these people be. They've lived here forever. This is their home. They should have control over their destiny, control over their territory. How dare you try to tell them what to do and take over their lives and things like that. Really? Who was in the United States before the British people came? Before the French people came? Before the Spanish people came? The Native Americans. And you're going to find out, I'm sure you already know what happens, but if you don't, you're going to find out in the next lesson how hypocritical the United States is for telling the world that. And yet you're going to find out what they do to the Native Americans. All right. So now we're going to talk about slavery. Okay. Now in the North, the cities started to expand. Okay. They're getting bigger, and places like New York, Philadelphia, Boston, things like those towns are getting bigger and bigger. That means they need more food to feed these people. Okay. Now in the North, they really can't grow too much crops. Okay. But they can have dairies and things like that, farms. But crops in some areas are pretty hard to grow because, again, not only is the ground not that great, but also the winters and things like that are very, very harsh, extremely harsh. And the weather is very cold. Okay. So it's kind of hard to grow things. Now, in the South, however, they could grow things, no problem. And because of that, the Southern states did not have many cities. They would have little cities here, 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 things like that. But and another thing, factories, no, they maybe had several here, here, here. That's about it. Because to them, they wanted to save as much land as they can for growing. To them, having a factory was a waste of land. Because again, look at the school we're at. Okay, they would see that plot of land as a waste. Not because they hate education or anything like that. No, because they're like, oh, look at that. poured that concrete, the the parking lot and all that stuff. God, that how much crops you can grow, how much corn, how much cotton, how much tobacco you can grow on that. Oh man, you're just wasting it. Oh, and year after year of that, every season, you're wasting valuable land for a school. Just so yeah, they did not like having permanent buildings down because why? They wanted more farmland. Now, what crops did they grow that made a lot of money? Tobacco, rice, sugarcane. If you've never seen a sugarcane, that thing can be anywhere from 6 to 8 feet tall. It's hollow inside. It's very hard, but the inside is where the sugar is, and that sugar is very, very sweet. Okay, it's kind of but because it has been processed, but yeah, it's sweet. But the king crop, the golden crop, was cotton. Now, Eli Whitney, he was an inventor. He basically saw that, you know what? There's like 20 slaves tearing through this cotton, taking out the seeds, taking out the sticks, taking out the leaves and stuff like that, cleaning the cotton. So he's like, you know what if I make this device that basically does that, stretches out the cotton, cleans it out, drops the seeds, you know, that way, instead of the plantation needing 20 people, they'll just need one person to go through this cotton. And then they won't need as many slaves, and that will slow down the slave trade. Awesome. So he was trying to stop the slave trade. But in fact, what ended up happening is he made things worse. So much more worse for the African Americans, for the slaves. Okay. Now, 2/3 of the exports was cotton. Now, exports means things leaving our country, like exit, exports. Exit, export, things leaving our country. Things coming into our country, think of the word like coming in, imports, in. Imports. Okay, that's the best way I've taught for students to remember what does import and exports mean. Okay, now in the South, they still have this saying: "Cotton is king." So what happened with the cotton gin was this: yes, Eli Whitney made this amazing machine that could do the work of 20 people for one person on a box. Instead of being like, well, we don't need, you know, uh, to buy more slaves. We have too many. No, 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 no. What they did, they didn't see it that way. The slave owners basically said, you know what? If these guys can clean the cotton faster, that means we can grow more cotton and then we can buy more of these boxes and then they can clean it faster and then we can have them out there picking even more cotton. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. They kept buying more land and buying more slaves. They bought slaves at a record pace. You have to remember, since like the 1600s up until 1820, there was about 100 or 1.5 million slaves. Okay, so about 200 some years, they got it to 1.5 million slaves, and in just 30 years, they added another 1.7. So they basically went over double. You know, so what took them about 200 some years to do, they did in 30 years. It was pretty bad. I mean, it was so much that 37% of the all the state in the South, 37% of the population were slaves. So, like I did in class, we had a class full of I want to say it was like 12 people, something like that. So I was like, okay, so if you really think about it, for every um 5 people, there's 2 slaves. So there I was like, there was at least then like 5 of you guys would be slaves. So yeah, it was quite a bit. Now, did was it just plantations, large plantations that had slaves? No, small farms had slaves too. Maybe not as much, but they would have at least like two, three, maybe. Medium size, you know, 7 to 10, maybe 12. Plantations, easily 20 and above. Now, were they all working out in the fields? No, some of them were, right? But then some of them were nannies, some of them were cooks, some of them were gardeners, you know. So yeah, like I said in class, I don't know if you ever seen the movie Forrest Gump when he's talking to his friend Bubba and he says, "My friend Bubba, mama cooks shrimp for her. She learned it from her mama and her mama from her mama." That's what he's talking about. That you know, and Bubba's ancestry, his great great grandmother was a slave who was a cook. That's how the family was really good at cooking shrimp. Passed throughout the generations, and it started off because she was a slave and as a cook. So here are some rules that slaves could not do. Number one, they could not own any property. And when I mean any property, I don't mean like land or a book. I'm talking anything. Like the clothes on their back, they could not say, "This is my shirt." No, that belongs to the person who owns you. "These are my shoes." No, that belongs to the person who owns you. They could own nothing. Absolutely nothing. Here's another one that just makes me go, wow, are you serious? They couldn't leave their master's premise without that master's permission. So even if the master, let's say they were all working doing something, cleaning up a shop, if the master was in their area, they had to ask him, "Can I go, dump this out in the trash can? Sir, can I do this or that? Can I put away this broom?" Whatever. They had to ask him for permission, even for the smallest thing. He came into their area, but then they had to ask him to leave. You know, it was just horrendous. Next one. This is one that one student actually in class was just like flabbergasted. He was like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is dead serious." A slave could not testify against a white person in court. Okay, even if they saw somebody being killed. Let's say you and someone else. Let's say I'm the slave. I see you killing somebody else. I mean, even if the blood splattered on me and I'm right there seeing it all, if the prosecution tried to put you in jail saying, "Oh, here's my witness who saw it all, he's a slave," the court would say, "No, no, they're not allowed." In the eyes of the courts in the South, the word of a slave meant nothing. Okay, imagine that no matter even if you saw it clear as day, you are probably a liar. Even if you're telling the truth, the court is basically saying you're probably a liar. We don't trust you. Your word is nothing. How bad is that? Now, I don't know about you guys, but I love watching comedy specials. I love them. They're funny. And before he got slapped by Will Smith, Chris Rock did one some years ago. And he was saying something to the effect of, the first drug dealers sold pages from books, you know. And he's like, "Yeah, hey man, I got a couple pages from Moby Dick right here. I got a page from the dictionary, letter D right here, man. Yeah." And the person I was watching this with at that time, they were just laughing, and I'm like, "No, he's basically being serious because it was forbidden for slaves to know how to read and write." So in a sense, he's probably right. There are probably some slave like, "Hey man, I found a page. You want to try to read this? Hey, keep a secret. Don't tell anyone. But I got this page from this torn up newspaper. You know, let's see if we can read this. What's it say?" If they wanted to read, they had to do it in secret, and they had to teach themselves. Now, there have been things I have read of, like uh, the master's wife trying to teach the nanny, trying to teach the cook how to read. And these women, once they were caught, they were basically, you know, punished very badly, but not as bad as a slave, you know, because again, if they were out and about getting groceries and let's say they said, "Oh, here's the apples," and there's a jar that says apples on it. How do you know that says apples? you know, and that would get people like, well, who taught you? And that could bring a lot of trouble to that family. So yeah, it was forbidden for slaves to read and write. Okay. Now, one of the most famous escaped slaves in U.S. history is that man right there, Frederick Douglass. Amazing man. If you have a chance to read his speeches and his letters, oh my God, they are beautifully written. The language is so impeccably picked out perfectly. I mean, it's just wow. Now, he wrote a book about being a slave called My Bondage and My Freedom. And in there, he talked about those rules that we just talked about. He talked about how life was, for a slave right when they got up to when they went to bed. He talked about the mistreatment, the food, the tearing up of families, husband and wives torn apart, mothers and daughters and sons and fathers, and the rapes that would happen. He would talk about all that stuff, and his book became a bestseller in Britain and all over Europe. People were reading this, going, "Is this really true? I mean, you don't treat people like this. How can anyone allow this?" Now, in the South, people are like, "Oh, no, no, he's just lying. You can't trust him. He's a slave. You can't trust him. Don't believe all that. That's hogwash. No, 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 no." In reality, they knew the truth. They knew this guy was telling the truth, you know. But to make themselves like, "Oh, we did nothing wrong. We treat them respectfully," stuff like that. They have to say that kind of crap, but they know how they treat them. Okay. Now, one of the things I was mentioning earlier was I've had students in the past say, "Well, if I was a slave, I would do this and that. I would have done this and that." They just sat back and they just let them do whatever they want to them, whip them and things like that. No, 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 no. So that's why I added this section, because I wanted you guys to know, not all the slaves were just docile and just letting things happen. No, they fought back, but they fought back their way. Okay. One of the most effective ways to really hurt a rich person is hit them in the wallet. Now, something like a slowdown was very, very effective. Huge plantation, huge, massive amount of land, and all these crops are out there, right? In the hot sun, things like that. Hey, that stuff's got to get picked up. Got to be picked out of the vine, things like that, or else too much time in the sun, they're going to rot. And if they rot, that means the owner's not going to have money. That's money just wasted. So that's what some of these runaway slaves. That's what some of these slaves would do. Do a slowdown. Take their time picking up all the stuff. Slowly cut the stem off, of the fruit or vegetable. Put in the bag. Because what's going to happen? What are they going to do? Get whipped? They've been whipped all their lives. They're used to it. They can take that pain. No problem. Give it to me. I can take the pain. You can't take the pain in the wallet. Okay. Another thing they would do, hey, yeah, want us to pick this all up? No problem. We'll pick it up. Boom. Start picking it up. No problem. Put it in the barn, in the houses, right? And then they would set fire to it. So there it goes. Thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes even $100,000 worth of goods, cotton, fruits, vegetables, whatever, gone. We don't know. We don't know how it happened. It just caught on fire. Maybe somebody ran away doing it. Man, that sucks. All right. Now, did some run away? Absolutely. Now, did some run away and then think, what, maybe I should kill my owner? Yeah, some did. Some actually did kill their owners before running away. Some just attacked, thinking they killed their owner, but they didn't. Use some type of violence. Okay. Before the Civil War, about 200,000 former slaves got their freedom, you know, and they lived up north. Some of them made it as far as Canada, you know. And some of them would do was they organized churches, organized um, ways to get money to help slaves come to freedom in the north. And this type of things where the Underground Railroad and some of that comes up. And other slaves, just wanted to live their life. They don't want anything to do with that stuff. That part of their life, they're done with it. They don't want to think about it. They just want to live the rest of their life. So they got jobs and earned money and just lived. And that's okay too. You know, that's okay too. So here's my question to you. Now, remember, Eli Whitney really didn't like slavery and he wanted a way to stop slavery. Okay. Now, if he had known his machine would create the opposite effect he wanted, do you think he still would have created it? Now, here's the thing I forgot to mention too. He made a ton of money, a lot of money from his invention. So think about it. You think he would be like, oh, yeah, no, if he knew this is going to make people's lives horrible, make slavery go on longer and get worse, but you're going to be really, 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 really rich. Basically, you and your children are going to be set up for life. What do you think? Do you think he would have gone ahead with it, or do you think he would have been like, no, 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 this is horrible. I'm not going to create this machine. Okay, what do you think? Okay, and tell me, why do you believe that? So once you've answered this question, you're done with this lesson. Hopefully, you learned something new. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. Okay, so with that being said, you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.